Don't tell your daughter. Come alone. Those were the words that made my stomach drop. The voice belonged to Carolyn Pierce, the photographer who had taken every picture at my daughter's wedding 1 month earlier. I found something terrible in the photographs, she whispered. Something you need to see, before I tell you what she found. If you've ever believed that families should never be allowed to exploit your kindness, hit that like button, subscribe to Ruthless Karma, and stay with me. Because what I discovered that morning changed the way I saw my own children, and forced me to make a decision I never imagined making. My name is Richard Reynolds. For 40 years. I had built Reynolds Hardware from a tiny storefront into 3 profitable stores. I had worked holidays, skipped vacations, and spent countless nights balancing invoices at a kitchen table. I thought I was building security for my family. That Tuesday morning, I was reviewing quarterly numbers when Carolyn's number appeared on my phone. I almost ignored it. Then she said my daughter Jacqueline's name. Mr. Reynolds. Please come alone. My throat tightened. What happened? I can't explain over the phone. I agreed to meet her. But before I left, my younger daughter Wendy was already shouting from the kitchen about her embarrassing Honda. You promised me a better car, Dad. Her boyfriend Benjamin laughed from the living room. Stretched across my recliner as if it belonged to him. 4 years together. No rent, no wedding, no plan, just demands. I drove downtown with a strange pressure behind my ribs. At Carolyn's studio, the smell of coffee and printer ink filled the air. She looked nervous. I almost didn't call, she said. Then she opened a folder. First came the wedding photos. Jacqueline glowing in white. Samuel beside her in his tuxedo. Smiling guests. Champagne. Flowers. The perfect day. Then Carolyn opened another image. My blood went cold. 2 hours before the ceremony, Samuel had been photographed through a studio window with another woman, a red-haired woman. His hands were buried in her hair, her body was pressed against his, and a wedding ring was visible against his chest. That isn't friendly, Carolyn whispered. No, I said. It isn't. She showed me the metadata timestamps and location information. Then she handed me a flash drive. I thought you deserved the truth. I drove home without remembering half the journey. That night, Jacqueline appeared at my house with her polished smile. She wanted $40,000 for a Scottsdale house. After everything you spent on the wedding, she said, this just completes the picture. 40,000. I stared at her. For the first time, I wondered if the wedding had ever been about love at all. Maybe I had just paid the entrance fee to a game I never knew I was playing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The flash drive sat on my desk. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the photograph. Samuel with another woman, hours before promising Jacqueline forever. But the photograph raised a bigger question. Why would Jacqueline marry him if she knew he was cheating? Then another thought hit me. Money. The wedding had cost me $65,000. Jacqueline had insisted on cash gifts and checks. No registry, she had said. We need flexibility. At the time, I thought she was simply being practical. Now I remembered something else. She had bragged that she and Samuel had collected nearly $45,000 in cash and checks. I went to the bank the next morning. My account manager, Patricia, pulled up the wedding check I had given them. $20,000. It had been deposited into a joint account. The account had been opened only 2 months before the wedding. Not years before. Not when they first started dating. 2 months. My hands went cold. I drove home carrying that fact like a stone in my chest. Then, as I walked through the kitchen, I heard Wendy upstairs on speakerphone. I stopped. Her voice carried clearly. Dad looks suspicious lately, but don't worry. Ben and I can stretch this another 6 months. He'll cave eventually. I froze. Then Jacqueline answered. Her voice was calm. Calculated. I've got 2 more months of playing happy wife. Then I file. Half those gifts are legally mine. Samuel already agreed to a 60-40 split. Wendy laughed. And Dad? He's too busy feeling proud of your sister's marriage to notice anything. My stomach twisted. Then Wendy said, keep him distracted. Ask him for something big. I already did, Jacqueline replied. 40,000 for the house. Wendy laughed again. He always caves. I backed away from the stairs. I closed my office door. Then I sat down. My hands were shaking. 2 daughters, both treating me like a bank account with a pulse. I thought about every Christmas, every tuition payment, every emergency. Every time I had said yes, because I believed helping supposed to do? They hadn't seen love. They had seen access. By midnight, I opened my laptop. I searched for a property attorney. The next morning, I met Robert McKenna. His office was on the 23rd floor, all glass and quiet authority. I laid everything on his desk. The photographs, the bank records, my notes about the phone conversation. He listened without interrupting. Finally, he said, "You have two separate problems. Your daughter and her boyfriend are living in your house without a lease, and your estate is exposed to people who clearly expect to receive it. What can I do?" He explained my options, including the legal process for removing unauthorized occupants and protecting my assets through an irrevocable trust. "How soon can we begin?" "Today," I signed. The fee was substantial, but for the first time in years, spending money felt like buying freedom instead of buying approval. Robert looked at me carefully. "You understand? This may permanently damage your relationship with your daughters?" I looked through the glass wall at the city below. "They already damaged it," I said. "I'm just finally admitting it. And for once, I didn't." The eviction notices arrived Friday. That evening, Wendy and Benjamin were sitting on my couch. Benjamin was pitching a new business idea, a craft brewery. He wanted $30,000. I placed the envelope on the coffee table. Wendy opened hers first. Her face changed instantly. "What is this?" "30 days," I said. Benjamin stood. "This is our home." "No," I replied. "It's my home." He stepped toward me. "You can't throw us out. You haven't paid rent in 4 years." Silence. Then Wendy began crying. Not ordinary tears. Performance tears. The kind that appeared when she needed something. "You're choosing money over your own daughter?" "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing not to be exploited anymore." Behind my locked office door, I heard them making calls. Jacqueline, Samuel. Everyone was suddenly concerned. Not about me. About what I might stop giving them. Over the next few days, they tried everything. Wendy claimed she was having stress-induced heart problems. Benjamin blocked my path in the garage and warned me about what the neighbors would think. Then his brewery proposal appeared on my kitchen counter. The amount had increased. $50,000. Desperation dressed up as entrepreneurship. I threw it away. Then Jacqueline and Samuel arrived without warning. They carried grocery bags and acted like a loving family. We ate dinner together. They laughed. They asked about my health. They complimented the house. Then Jacqueline gently changed the subject. "You're getting older, Dad." I felt my jaw tighten. "Wouldn't a condo be easier?" Samuel nodded. "Less maintenance." Jacqueline smiled. "And whatever the house sells for could help everyone." There it was. Not concern. Appetite. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me. At my property. At my savings. At everything I had built. I stood. "Thank you for your concern." Jacqueline blinked. "I'm not selling the house." That night, I drove straight to Robert's office. "They're coordinating," I told him. "They want my assets." He didn't ask whether I was sure. He simply opened the file. Then we accelerate the plan. That evening, we changed my beneficiaries and completed the remaining trust paperwork. For the first time, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. Because I finally understood something painful. People who love you don't constantly calculate what you are worth. 2 weeks later, I decided it was time for one final conversation. I set the dining table with the good china. 5 places, and beside my plate, I placed a manila folder. Then I invited them all to dinner. They arrived smiling. They thought they were coming to negotiate. They had no idea they were walking into the moment when their entire plan would see the dinner began quietly. Too quietly. Wendy complimented the food. Benjamin talked about business. Jacqueline asked whether I had reconsidered selling the house. Samuel barely touched his plate. I watched them carefully. These were my children. And yet, sitting across from them, I felt like I was watching strangers wearing familiar faces. Jacqueline leaned forward. "Dad, we're only trying to make sure everyone is taken care of." I slid the manila folder across the table. She frowned. "What's this?" "Open it." She did. The first photograph fell onto the table. Samuel and the red-haired woman. His face drained of color. Jacqueline stopped breathing. Wendy stared. Benjamin looked between all of us. I said nothing. Jacqueline finally whispered, "Where did you get that?" "Your wedding photographer." Samuel's hands trembled. I placed another photograph beside the first, then another. Carolyn had captured enough evidence to make denial pointless, but I wasn't finished. I also heard your phone conversation, Jacqueline. Her eyes snapped toward me. You said you had 2 more months of playing happy wife. Then you would file. You said half the wedding gifts were legally yours. Silence. The clock on the wall suddenly sounded deafening. Benjamin stood halfway. You listened to a private conversation? I looked at him. You lived in my house for 4 years without paying rent. I think privacy stopped being your biggest concern a long time ago. He sat down. Wendy began crying. Dad, please. I looked at her. Please what? She couldn't answer. I opened another document. I have created an irrevocable trust. Jacqueline's face hardened. My business. My savings. My property. Everything that can legally be protected is now protected. You can't do that, she snapped. I already did. Samuel finally spoke. You're destroying your family. No, I said. I stood slowly. You did that yourselves. I folded my napkin. Wendy, Benjamin, you have 15 days. Benjamin slammed his hand on the table. You'll regret this. Maybe. I looked around the table one last time. But I'd rather regret protecting myself than spend the rest of my life regretting that I didn't. Then I walked into my office. Behind me, the house erupted. Shouting, accusations, crying, threats, but I closed the door. And for the first time their noise couldn't reach me. The final 15 days became psychological warfare. My coffee maker was smashed. Wendy told neighbors I had become cruel. Jacqueline arrived with a psychologist, implying that my decisions proved I was mentally unstable. I told them both to leave. Then Wendy tried one final performance. She cried. She apologized. She said she wanted to become the daughter I deserved. For 1 second, my heart almost softened. Then I mentioned the phone call. Her expression changed instantly. The tears stopped. Fine, she snapped. Don't expect us to care what happens to you. I nodded. Now I know. That was the last piece of doubt I had left. On the 30th day, I pulled into my driveway behind a sheriff's deputy and Robert McKenna. The house looked exactly as it had for years, but something inside it had changed. Deputy Martinez gave Wendy and Benjamin 2 hours to collect their belongings. 2 hours. That was all. Suddenly, the house they had treated like a free hotel became temporary. Wendy rushed from room to room, crying. Benjamin cursed under his breath. He complained about everything. The food, the furniture, the eviction. Me, he called me an ungrateful old man. I said nothing. There was nothing left to explain. At the driveway, Wendy turned around. You'll regret this, she said. When you need help, don't come crying to us. I looked at my daughter. I won't. And I meant it. That evening, Jacqueline called. Her voice was cold. I hope you're satisfied. I sat alone in my kitchen. Satisfied with what? You destroyed this family. I closed my eyes. No, Jacqueline, I took a breath. I stopped letting it destroy me. She hung up. 3 days later, Samuel contacted me from an unknown number. His message was longer than I expected. He admitted Jacqueline had known about the affair before the wedding. The marriage had never been about love. It had been an arrangement, a financial strategy. He wanted to pay me $10,000 to stay quiet while they handled their divorce. I read the message twice, then I deleted it. Blocked the number. I didn't need money from them. I didn't need revenge from them. I needed distance. Weeks passed. Then Jacqueline called again. This time, she wanted $20,000 toward her divorce settlement. I answered. She started explaining. I listened for several seconds. Then, I said one word. No, I hung up. That was it. Their carefully designed plan had collapsed. The marriage ended. The money they expected to divide disappeared into legal expenses. The wedding gifts they had planned to exploit became part of a legal mess that cost them far more than they had imagined. There was no dramatic courtroom victory, no screaming match, no grand public humiliation, just consequences. Quiet, expensive, permanent, and somehow that was more satisfying. Because they had believed I would always rescue them. They had built their entire plan around one assumption. Richard Reynolds would always say yes. They were wrong. For 40 years, I had believed being a good father meant sacrificing everything. Now I understood the difference between generosity and surrender. Generosity is given freely. Surrender is what happens when someone teaches you that saying no makes you selfish. I was finally learning to say no. 3 weeks after Wendy and Benjamin left, I woke before sunrise. The house was silent, not the uncomfortable silence that had followed the eviction. A different kind. Peaceful. I made coffee and walked onto the terrace. The morning sun was climbing over Paradise Valley, painting the mountains in soft gold. For years, I had imagined retirement as a time when I would finally stop working. I had never imagined it as a time when I would finally stop being used. My coffee maker had been replaced. It was a tiny thing, but I noticed it every morning. Because Benjamin had smashed the old one during his final weeks in the house, the replacement cost less than $100. Yet every time I poured coffee, I remembered what that broken machine had represented. They could break things. They could demand things. They could manipulate me, but I no longer had to repair the damage for them. Robert's final letter arrived that week. The trust was fully filed. My assets were protected. My future was mine. Completely mine. And then something unexpected happened. I started living, not existing. Living. On Wednesdays, I began guitar lessons. I had wanted to learn for 40 years. 40 years. I had always told myself there would be time later. Later had finally arrived. On Fridays, I volunteered at the senior center. I repaired broken shelves, doors, chairs, and small appliances. People thanked me. Not because they wanted money, not because they wanted property, not because they were calculating what I might leave behind. They were simply grateful. One afternoon, Carolyn called. The photographer, the woman whose phone call had started everything. She asked how things had turned out. I looked across my quiet terrace. Things are good, I said. For the first time in years, truly good. She laughed softly. You deserve peace. I smiled. I think I'm finally learning what that feels like. We made plans for coffee. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. I thought about Jacqueline, Wendy, the people I had once believed would stand beside me when I was old. Maybe one day they would call. Maybe they would apologize. Maybe they wouldn't. I no longer needed to know. My daughters believed I had destroyed the family by choosing myself. They were wrong. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped financing my own exploitation. That distinction changed everything. I used to believe revenge meant making someone suffer. Now I knew better. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is refusing to participate in the same cycle anymore. No shouting, no threats, no cruelty, just boundaries and consequences. I finished my coffee as the sun climbed higher over the hills. Inside the house, my guitar waited. For the first time in decades, so did the rest of my life. I thought back to that photographer's phone call. One sentence had changed everything. Come alone. Don't tell your daughter. At the time, I thought Carolyn was bringing me terrible news. She was. But she was also bringing me something I had lost without realizing it. Clarity. The photographs exposed Samuel's betrayal. The bank records exposed the money trail. The overheard conversation exposed the plan. But none of those things would have mattered if I had continued making excuses. That was the hardest truth. The people exploiting me weren't the only ones who had to change. I did too. I had to stop confusing love with unlimited access. I had to stop believing that being needed was the same as being loved. And I had to accept that sometimes protecting your future means disappointing people who benefited from your past. Jacqueline had expected another $40,000. Wendy had expected a new car. Benjamin had expected a $50,000 business investment. They expected my house, my savings, my retirement. They expected me to keep saying yes. Instead, they received boundaries and consequences. Was I angry? Of course. There were nights when I replayed their words in my head. He'll cave. He always does. Those sentences hurt more than the affair. Because the affair was Samuel's betrayal. Those words were my daughters admitting they had studied my kindness and turned it into a weakness. But eventually, even that pain became useful. It taught me something. You can love someone and still lock the door. You can forgive someone and still refuse them access to your finances. You can miss the person they used to be without inviting the person they became back into your life. And you can choose peace without feeling guilty about it. Would I ever speak to my daughters again? Maybe, maybe not. If Wendy called, I would let the phone ring. If Benjamin texted another complaint, I would delete it. If Jacqueline asked for money again, the answer would remain the same. No, not because I wanted to punish them. Because I finally respected myself. That was the real ending. Not the eviction. not the divorce, not the trust. Me. I had spent 40 years building businesses, paying bills, protecting people, and making sure everyone else had a future. Then one photographer called me and showed me the truth. I had been so busy building a life for everyone else that I had forgotten to build one for myself. So I started, one guitar lesson at a time, one quiet morning at a time, one firm no at a time. Justice, I learned, isn't always revenge. Sometimes it is simply a boundary. Sometimes it is walking away. Sometimes it is refusing to hand another dollar to someone who has already taken enough. And sometimes, the most satisfying ending isn't watching your enemies fall. It's watching yourself finally stand. If this story moved you, hit the like button, subscribe to Ruthless Karma, and tell me in the comments, would you have done the same thing in Richard's position? And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, share your story below. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's building a peaceful life they can no longer control.